Welcome to China Tech Talk, the weekly discussion of technology and startups here in China. I'm John Artman, editor-in-chief of TechNode, and as always, I'm joined by Matthew Brennan, founder of China Channel. So this week we talk with Dominic Penaloza, the chief innovation officer of Naked Hub. It's really interesting discussion in particular because we haven't really covered the co-working market, and so it's really kind of cool because he tells us not only about Naked Hub but also gives us a broader overview of some of the things happening in the co-working space.
Yeah, and I think Naked Hub is quite a unique company. We go into their history a bit, and certainly I've spent quite a bit of time, I think you probably have as well, John, in some of their locations in Shanghai. They do have some popular locations there, and the market's red hot this year. We haven't covered it yet, and it's very much in the shared economy space, and I think we have a good discussion. We also touch upon, because Naked Hub is actually the founder is non-Chinese, but actually most people don't realize that, and they think of it as a Chinese company. So they've done a really, really good job of localizing. So we try and touch upon some takeaways there of like what people, how non-Chinese can look at entering the Chinese market and what they need to pay attention to.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Dominic gives us some really good advice. And he also talks a little bit about how he fits, how he sees Naked Hub fitting into the overall co-working market. And in particular, we were able to touch a little bit upon their biggest unicorn in the room, if you will, WeWork, which is aggressively making inroads into China. And so it was really interesting to hear him talk about how they're a little bit different, and also kind of what it's like being the China local player defending against a non-Chinese company trying to enter the market. But with that, we give you Dominic Penaloza. Well, Dominic, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Oh, my pleasure, John. Thanks for having me.
So one of the first questions that we'd like to ask our guests is, what's your China story? So tell us a little bit about how you came to China, what you've been doing, and then how you came to join Naked.
Well, my China story begins a long time ago. In 1993, I moved here to set up a ball bearing distribution company, and helping with my father and some partners. My name is Dominic Penaloza, but I'm actually 7/8 Chinese and I'm 1/8 Filipino, but I was born and raised in Canada. So at that time, China was just reawakening, and it was just fascinating and also part of my family heritage. So I came over on what was supposed to be a one-year trip, and I've been here for 25 years. The bearing company was sold to a Japanese listed bearing company just this year. So it's really been a huge entrepreneurial journey for myself and my family. In the meantime, I spent 6 years in private equity, working for 2 different private equity funds, running around the Asia Pacific region, doing private equity deals and taking care of investees. And then I became an internet entrepreneur at the beginning of the internet, which is like in the late 90s. And I've been a serial entrepreneur in consumer internet ever since. So I founded a cross-cultural community site, otherwise known as a dating site, called Friends, which has 5 million members and has been profitable for many years. And I also founded Youshewang, which is a Chinese professional social network, kind of like LinkedIn. That reached 1 million members, but it failed ultimately. But having spent so much time doing online community, the opportunity to join my friend Grant in Naked Hub was just really natural and really attractive to me. What we're now creating at Naked Hub is really an online and offline business community and service.
So tell us more about that. I mean, like what kind of pulled you into working at Naked Hub? How long have you been there? And what does your day-to-day look like?
Okay, well, I've been here since the beginning of Naked Hub, pretty much. Naked Hub is only 2 years old, so and that's one of the things that I'm doing here. My title is Chief Innovation Officer, and what that really means is really trying to make the whole Naked Group, and especially Naked Hub, to actually think more like an internet company and actually behave more like an internet company. Really high growth with an internet mentality. So So I'm responsible for innovation, which is a big responsibility to carry. But luckily, the company is very entrepreneurial and very innovative. So actually, all of us are kind of in the innovation team. And the day-to-day is figuring out the frontier of how to push the frontier of the notion of sharing real estate, making one of the world's biggest and oldest industries much more efficient and much more environment friendly.
That's an interesting point, then, Dominic. How does an offline business think more like them? Could you give us like a clear example?
Well, it's really it's a mindset. It's applying internet principles such as lean startup or agile development methodologies to our different workflows in the offline world. So we've been learning a lot in that. We now have it such that if the landlord gives us the keys to a new building, we could renovate it and have it ready for opening in about 4 months. And our fastest ever is 3 months. So that's quite unusual, I think, in the real estate industry. So I think that's a great example of how we're trying to move really fast compared to traditional norms. And even the whole growth rate of Naked Hub is also very much like an internet company. So we have, literally 2 years ago, there was only one Naked Hub location. Hopefully you guys have visited that one before. It's the one on Fuxinglu in Shanghai. But today we have 15 open locations, and we have another literally 20 more locations in various stages of development. And our revenues have been growing exponentially. Our member base has been growing similarly. And so the whole thing is really behaving more like an internet company than a traditional real estate company, that's for sure.
Well, can you give us a short history of the co-working space market in China and kind of, give us a bit of insight into how Naked Hub fits in there?
Okay. Well, I've heard from various government friends that actually co-working was actually invented in China, in Shanghai to be specific. So they give Xinchejian the credit for being the first co-working space in the world. That was opened around 2010. Other people may dispute that. There may have been some other co-working places in the US or Europe. But basically, co-working is quite a new industry. I'm sure you haven't failed to notice that it's been booming very much recently. But overall, we take the view that we're literally in stage 1 out of 10. We're still in the very early stage of co-working with a high degree of innovation and change to be expected before it nears anything close to maturity. The local real estate experts, the local real estate pundits such as Jones Lang LaSalle or Knight Frank or CBRE, any of these real estate brokerage agencies with research arm, there seems to be a consensus that 30% of the world's real estate is going to be flexible and co-working by the year 2030. Today, in China, it's in the low single digits. I think Shanghai is probably the highest at around 3 or 4%. And London is the highest in the world with 7% of corporate, 7% of commercial real estate is already co-working. But we're going to be growing from 5% to 30% coming 13 years. So there's a long way to go.
Sure. The market seems to, in China at least, blown up a couple of years back in reaction to the States, at least my perception. Is that, how did this actually, what sparked the explosion in China in your mind? How did this market, get to this massive growth rate?
Well, I think the market and the entrepreneurs within the market are quickly realizing it's actually a global revolution in real estate. Right. It may sound grandiose, but based on the 30%, it's legitimately a global revolution in real estate. And so everybody in the real estate industry is talking about it and figuring out how to respond to it, including traditional landlords, both large and small. And so, with real estate as one of the most important industries in China and also a major hobby for a lot of people in China, it's definitely not surprising that China would not only rapidly jump onto the co-working boom, but also increasingly taking a role in the whole innovation globally speaking. Because there's just so much investment and energy and entrepreneurial attitude here in China that there's several or even dozens of different companies and brands working on this powerful notion of how to share real estate to create better outcomes for everybody.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the market does seem to be very fragmented and regionalized. I travel a lot in China, and every major city seems to have different brands in this space that seem to dominate regionally. It does seem to be an early stage. It's quite fragmented. But then, so there are people saying, "Oh, it's already too crowded. There's already a bubble in this space." What would you say to those people? Apart from what you've just given us with the 30%. I mean, is there room for more competitors? Is the market going to consolidate? How do you think about that?
I think I would yes, and yes. I think it's a common pattern. If you study the tech industry, especially in the sharing economy companies, you can see a very predictable pattern. Whether it was a little earlier in car sharing and ride hailing, and just now we're in the midst of the bike sharing, and also with co-working recently in the past 2 years. A lot of market entry, a lot of startups in the space. A lot of competition, a lot of price wars, and I think we're beginning to see consolidation. It's already begun. So it's a familiar pattern. I think perhaps one thing unique to the co-working side is that obviously it's more capital intensive. It's funny when you talk to investors, a lot of tech investors look at co-working and say, "Oh, that's a really capital intensive business or so-called asset heavy business." But when we talk to real estate investors, they look at it completely opposite. They say, "Oh, I really like this kind of asset light model." So it's really about perspective. But I think even the small guys, even anyone can start a co-working space. Mom and pop can start it. The three of us could start probably a cool co-working space if we wanted to. And it's fine as a standalone business, actually. It's great as a lifestyle business. What we've noticed in the West, co-working spaces are almost like coffee shops. They're almost like there's a vast network of independent coffee shops, and there's also a vast network of independent co-working spaces. But there's also an opportunity for something like a Starbucks, where there's a version of the co-working business model that does have network effects, that does give big benefits to the owner of a large network of locations and a large brand, whether it be a Naked Hub or WeWork or large networks like that.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. And so, you look at this type of location-based business that you're building, and I think that one of the challenges is probably going to be that network effect, where you look at Bailey's, the gym company that tried and failed to build up that national presence in the United States. And one of the reasons that they did fail was because they were not able to build up that network effect. Gyms at the time, at least, they very much very, very, very local, and it was difficult to kind of build up any type of economies of scale. So how is co-working different in that sense? How can co-working build up that network?
Well, I think that if we're comparing it to gyms, there's tremendous advantages. I think fitness is a very broken industry, facing a lot of challenges, but primarily stemming from the tyranny of real estate, or specifically the tyranny of real estate prices and the traditional real estate model. Big Group is busy working on a different product, a different company called Bula, where it's all about base sharing for commercial real estate for non-work, like especially for fitness and wellness right now. But that's another totally different story. But I guess with co-working, to answer your question, we have a huge advantage, which is that pretty much everybody spends most of their time in the office or in the workspace, and the office market is absolutely huge and vital. And so at least for Naked Hub style co-working, our real competition is really the grade A and grade B office market, which is just a vast market. So our addressable market is so big, so that enables us to have a plan to open 200 locations in the coming 3 years, and to create that network effect. And even then, we're still only addressing a very small percentage of the total market.
Okay, it makes sense. But one question: would wouldn't larger companies have deep concerns about privacy and protection of their employees from being spied upon or data and things like that? You must run into those concerns. How would you answer that?
Yeah, those are very legitimate concerns, and I think that's one of the small reasons I say that we're still at the beginning of the evolution of what we call co-working. Maybe the classic WeWork, Chelsea, New York City location. If we call that co-working 1.0, I think we're already very much busy working on co-working 2.0, and that does take into account the different needs of large organizations. I wish if you can visit Naked Hub, our location on Loshangguandu in Gubei district in Shanghai, I would take you up to the 8th floor, and what you'll see when the elevator opens on the 8th floor is you'll see that there's just one company there. So our member is called Viking Cruises. It's the China headquarters of one of the top 3 cruise operators in the world. And they have the space of about roughly 320 seats. And you'll notice that there's a lot of branding. There's a lot of privacy. They have some custom layout for their space. And so it's a great showcase, or it's a living example of how large organizations are taking advantage of co-working, because they actually can achieve a better office at a lower price. And so that's a no-brainer for startups, but it's increasingly becoming a no-brainer even for large corporates.
Sure. Well, just to play devil's advocate here, how would that be different from them renting their own floor then?
Well, it would be cheaper and better. So because of the power of sharing with the physical design of our spaces in Naked Hub, we actually figured out a way to reduce the overall cost for our customers, meaning that the space is used so much more efficiently that you actually need to rent less of it. So that's the source of the cost saving. But we figured out how to make our users happy with less space. Where obviously normally, if I give you less space, you'll be unhappy. The way we make people happy with our space is through community, and that's why going back to the beginning, community really is the key word to this whole service, because that's what makes people happy about it, and that's what makes people actually stick to it.
Okay, so by community, I mean, when I think of co-working spaces and community, I think events. I think, I know Naked Hub is very, very active with events in Shanghai, as many of the co-working spaces are. How does the community go online as well? Because I know you guys have an app, but I've never used it before. I do know some people who work in Naked Hub, but how does this community work beyond just doing lots of events and having an app? There's obviously a lot more to it.
Yes, there is a lot more to it. I think typically the user experience is that as soon as you walk into a Naked Hub for the first time, you could actually feel something quite different. It's like a palpable feeling. It's some kind of vibe. I think through a lot of effort, especially through our great community team that we have here and community team stationed at each of our spaces, combined with our design team, we create spaces that actually have a distinct culture to them. And that's a really, really important point. So when you walk in, you instantly feel that it's different than any office or workspace that you've ever been to before. There's a certain kind of human energy flowing around because there's just so much human interaction going on. And that's intentionally stirred up by our technology and our community team. And it results in this distinct culture where it's okay to say hi to strangers. And that's completely the opposite of the traditional office building, where a lot of our members, they move into Naked Hub from grade A office buildings like Plaza 66, one of the top famous and expensive office buildings in Shanghai. These guys, they work in Plaza 66 for years and they never meet one single person, even though they want to. And they move over to Naked Hub Nanjinglu, which is just a few blocks away. And instantly it's a completely different environment and they're able to enjoy it so much more because they meet new friends, they meet new business contacts, and it's just a much more interesting place to be.
So you're talking a little bit of kind of, about what differentiates you as a brand. And even your CEO says, that we are a lifestyle brand that isn't just about work. So, what are some other ways that you guys are a bit different? Because I know that you guys don't really do much incubation. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct. Yes. And thank you for raising the word incubation. Perhaps I should have mentioned this earlier when we were talking about the local recent boom in co-working. The way we see it is that in China, there's two segments. You can call it the incubator segment and the premium segment, or maybe you could call it the 2-star segment and the 4-star segment. And don't forget, we're coming from a resorts and hospitality background with Naked Group. So I'll come back to that later. But most of the activity and investment in the China market has been in the incubator segment. It's very much aligned with central government priorities. There's a lot of energy for the shuang chuang, like the mass entrepreneurship and mass innovation. So there's a lot of support and subsidies going on in that segment. The segment that Naked Hub is in is another segment, which is more, as I mentioned earlier, it's more of a replacement for grade A office space and grade B office space. So it's actually not the right solution for super early stage startup, like especially angel stage or especially pre-angel stage, doesn't really fit in Naked Hub. It would be more appropriate to fit in a more incubator style co-working base. So with the 4-star segment or the premium segment, what we do there is offer, it's a higher price point, and it's also a higher level of service. So that's a big, when you look at the co-working market, it's useful to look at it as two different markets. And you can analyze the different services available and the different competitors within those segments more clearly. So with Naked Hub in the premium segment, we're very much focused on this segment. We're by far the largest in Asia Pacific in this segment in terms of number of seats or number of locations, even compared with WeWork. As you pointed out, the community or that distinct culture is definitely one of our major differentiators. Perhaps that's number one. But I guess there's 2 or 3 others. There's the physical design. We have an in-house team that's now grown to 50 architects and interior designers. By doing it in-house, we're able to move very quickly and learn from our own mistakes versus outsourcing it and create a consistently and increasingly better and comfortable basis. And that's one of the initial attractions why people choose Naked Hub. It's the physical beauty of the space, but I think community is what makes them stay and makes them very happy. Hospitality, the Naked Group is originally started 10 years ago as an operator of luxury, eco-friendly resort in the bamboo-covered mountains near Shanghai. Almost every Shanghai resident knows Naked Stables and Naked Castle, or Luoxingu and Luoxinbao are the Chinese name. But we've been doing 5-star hospitality for 10 years in China. And so that DNA and that competency was automatically applied into Naked Hub. And as Matt said, Naked or Luoxin, it's actually more precise to call it Luoxin because 92% of all of our customers are actually mainland Chinese at the resort. Most of them don't even know it's called Naked something or Naked Stable. It's a lifestyle brand that's all about naked in the sense of rediscovering yourself, like getting out of Shanghai and going up into the mountains, being close to nature and being in the clean air and relative silence and just enjoying yourself and enjoying your family. And with a very much a green ethos. So it was the first LEED Platinum certified resort ever in China. And so we take all that, and it's maybe the third big differentiator of Naked Hub. So for example, if you're a Naked Hub member, you actually get free fitness classes every day. So there's 1 free hour of physical fitness, whether it's usually yoga, but sometimes Kung Fu or Zumba. And then 1 hour of mental fitness, which is usually different forms of meditation classes. We have a large network of trainers in the different fitness categories. So we bring them in, and that's just a free benefit that's included in the price. We also have Naked Angel, or 罗心天使, where at the press of a button in our app, in the exclusive Hubber app, we call our members Hubbers, by the way. You tap the button and you're instantly connected by voice or by chat, it's up to you, with a team of Naked Angels, which are are effectively concierge for office. So the community team takes care of your day-to-day physical needs in the workspace, and does community matchmaking between the different members of the community. But the Naked Angel, it helps you with administrative tasks. It's basically secretary sharing or executive assist sharing. So you can order food, or you could book tickets, air tickets, train tickets. You can even order cars, which is very popular. Task can get help to arrange projectors for a meeting room or things like this. So these are some examples of I think, a high level of service that you get at Naked Hub that you don't get anywhere else.
Right. In some other co-working spaces, ones that are a little bit more focused on early stage startups, I think, they offer services like legal counsel or help with finding accountants and stuff. You guys, I guess, wouldn't provide that, right? Given your positioning.
We actually do provide those because those are needs of many companies. We actually, one of the services that is very unique and that we're very proud of is it's called business needs. And so, or 商务需求. If you go into our Hubber app, one of the prominent features is it's effectively an online bulletin board, but our Hubbers post needs there, including needs like the one that you mentioned. I need some tax advice, or I need a certain kind of legal advice. They post it there, and then the community comes in to help solve it. And it's curated and match-made by our team. So we have an online community curator. It's actually a full-time position here. And that team makes sure that every business need is responded to and takes a proactive stance in terms of the initial round of matchmaking. But it's so amazing to see when the community jumps in and starts to refer friends or suggest solutions. So you post your business need, and then up to now we have, or as of today, 52% is the number. 52% of all the business needs that have ever been posted so far have already been solved. And only the person who posted it has the power to say whether it's solved or not. A trick that we track very carefully.
So, we've been talking a lot about kind of what the types of services that Naked Hub provides. But how does Naked Hub stand inside of Naked Group? Is it like is it its own separate company that is able to take on funding, or is it just kind of its own a department of Naked Group?
Okay, yeah, good question. It started out as a project within Naked Group, but it quickly branched off and became its own company. So now Naked Group has 3 business units or 3 subsidiaries that are quite distinct. The first one is the resorts business. So that's Naked Stables, Naked Castle. And that itself is actually evolving quite a lot these days as well. So there's great demand for Naked Resorts management services from landlords from all over China and even Asia. So that hospitality business is evolving as we speak as well. Number 2 is Naked Hub. So that is now an independent company. It did take outside funding for the first time last year. The second half of last year, we did our Series B investment that was led by Gaw Capital, a very renowned real estate investment company globally and also in China. And Trustbridge Partners, a fairly well-known hedge fund with heavy expertise in technology. And then the third one is Bula. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but it's a brand new project, still in the early test stages, but trying to push the limits of applying sharing principles to real estate. So Naked Hub has its own CEO and its own management team. I think we have almost 200 full-time employees now, including the community teams at each of the hubs, and is just on a path to becoming a seriously large company in and of itself.
Right. How large are we talking? What's your current valuation, Dominic?
Well, we haven't disclosed the valuation, and we're still in the midst of actually figuring out exactly what that is, because we're actually in the midst of doing a C round financing. But our goal is to open 200 locations by the end of 2020. But interestingly, though, as I've been saying today, we're still in the very early stage of co-working, and even this notion of locations may not be the right metric anymore. The right metric might be something like gross floor area under management, or perhaps a number of members under management, because we're finding out ways to grow this business aside from the traditional way of, leasing a space in a building and making it into a co-working space and selling memberships to the end users. We're actually doing a lot of innovation in terms of new models of applying co-working type services to large office buildings, or even, after building our own software for 18 months, it's got to be one of the more advanced and robust operating systems or operating backends for a co-working network in Asia, plus the front end of the online and offline community app that we discussed earlier. We found out that after building this software for 18 months with a team of almost, now it's grown to almost 50 internet people, turns out that a lot of landlords are actually looking for solutions like this. Even traditional landlords with many office buildings, they also see the same trend that we were discussing earlier. They also see that 30% of their industry is becoming flexible and co-working. And so they're figuring out how to participate in that revolution. And one of their weaknesses is actually on the consumer side. Making consumer applications, or especially social applications, is something that they don't do particularly well. And so they're looking for help and for partnerships in these areas. So we're working on some really exciting innovations. We'll come out with some more official announcements right after Chinese New Year. But I think the ways that we can grow the Naked Hub business, but the whole co-working industry in general, I think there's just still so much innovation that's happening right now and in the coming years.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. But I'm curious. I mean, so speaking of valuation, I think it's hard to when we're looking at the big players in the co-working space, and looking at like how much money these companies are worth, including yours. I mean, we have to mention WeWork, which is a co-working unicorn, and they're recently begun to step up their expansion here in China. And so I'm curious. I mean, like, how do you guys see your relationship? How are you different from WeWork, and how does it feel to be kind of like the China incumbent, defending against a foreign invader, if you will?
Okay. Nice friendly way of asking the question. Thank you. But yeah, we view ourselves, 罗新社, as the short answer to the question is probably to say that we view Naked Hub, 罗新社, as Didi, and we view WeWork as Uber. And so everyone knows how that story went, and we believe this story will be following similar lines. The real estate world in China is very tricky. There's a lot of specific local issues to navigate. And obviously, community, I think you mentioned it earlier as well, community is a local or even hyper-local thing. So I think that when it comes to delivering the concept of premium co-working in China, I think we definitely have a number of big advantages. But at the same time, it's probably not a winner-takes-all kind of industry. Perhaps it's more like the hotel industry, where several large brands coexist because the market is so large. And location, no matter what we do, location, it's still very much rooted in specific real estate locations, such that it's hard to imagine just one brand being able to dominate such a huge market share. So there's probably room for a number of large players, and that's how we view it. We talk a lot with the leadership of WeWork and other players in co-working, and there's a certain amount of spirit of everyone learning together and innovating together, because it really is still just the early stage for co-working.
My question was about just what you said there made me think, actually, this market is a little bit different, though, from ride sharing, in that in China, it's always Alibaba, Tencent moving in and backing someone, and those guys eventually taking the market. That doesn't seem to be happening here. Why is that, Dominic?
You mean, why hasn't one of the big three tech companies sort of thrown its weight behind one of the players? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know Tencent, for example, have their kind of incubation spaces as well. across China. There's quite a few of them, but they're not leading. It doesn't seem to be the same situation as you made the comparison with Didi and Uber. It seems to be quite different.
Well, in terms of the question as to why haven't any of the BAT made a heavy investment into one particular co-working player, it probably will happen. It just hasn't happened yet. Yes, some of the big players are involved in the space. Not just the one that you mentioned, but also Alibaba has a number of offline initiatives to create channels for their growing suite of enterprise or B2B services. For example, Ali Cloud, but a lot of other services as well. So it's not so hard to imagine that kind of an investment and support happening.
Okay, but it hasn't happened yet. The market's not reached. It's a little bit too early, is what you're saying.
Nothing substantial has happened yet. It's funny when we talk with internet people or technology investors, they say, what an asset heavy, what an asset heavy business it is. But I think it's probably a matter of time. Look at Amazon Whole Foods, for example. So there's hardly anything that's pure online or pure offline these days. So that's why I think that it is a matter of time.
Right. Makes sense.
But also, I mean, looking at as you put it, Dominic, kind of the idiosyncrasies of the China market. One of the big ones is regulation. So, I mean, so can you give us a bit of an introduction to how co-working and this market kind of fits in with the regulation, and what are some of the challenges around that?
Well, I think real estate has a lot of its own innate regulation to begin with. Fortunately, providing workspace or workspace via membership or workspace as a service is not specifically regulated, but there are certainly there's a raft of different regulations that we need to navigate when it comes to operating any kind of physical space. Not only the commercial aspect, but also the events. You need a separate business scope to be able to operate events and hold events. F&B, when you serve coffee and beer and tea to people, that's regulated. When you offer fitness, the fitness providers are also regulated. We don't provide it though, but we're a platform for that. You may have seen some headlines up in Beijing recently. There was something about a crackdown on some co-working spaces actually. But as we understand it, that was mostly related to lack of compliance with tax filing regulations by the individual members of those co-working spaces. That's another area that we have to cover as well. The business registration and tax compliance.
Right. I think some of that was also dealing specifically with incubation projects as well, where some incubators in Beijing weren't fully compliant, and so the government ordered them to stop taking on new incubation projects.
Right. Exactly. And related to their whether they were registering companies in compliance with all the regulations or not. And of course, when you get into taking equity in someone else's company, that's a serious topic.
But I think, before we started recording, you and I talked a little bit about kind of how things are slowing down. It feels like from my end, at least, it feels like co-working is slowing down a little bit as we get closer to the end of the year. So, I mean, but the thing is, we still have so many players in this market. So there's WeWork, URWork, People Squared, Sandbox, Tech Temple, and the list goes on and on and on. My Dream Plus. I mean, I'm just coming up with ones off the top of my head now. So, I mean, is the market too crowded? Is there a bit of a bubble, and are we actually seeing things slow down?
I think there was a frenzy of activity. As we touched upon earlier, it's an asset it can be viewed as an asset intensive industry, but to get started is not so difficult. To get started with one or two locations, so there are a lot of entrants. It appears to be a simple business that simple to understand, simple to operate. Whether that's true or not is probably worth a debate, but certainly didn't stop a lot of people from entering the market. And especially in that incubator segment. So most of those brands that you mentioned are squarely in the incubator segment. I think we're in the midst of, it has slowed down compared to those heady days of maybe 12 and 18 months ago. I know for a fact that generally speaking, the investment community is wary of co-working. A lot of it is because of some of these smaller operators, because when an investor examines their books and their business model, they quickly conclude that it's 二房东, which means secondhand landlord, meaning that I'll rent this floor from you for $1, and then I'm going to rent it out to my customer for $1.10 or $1.20, and that's not a very attractive business model. China Renaissance, which is probably by far the most well-known and reputable investment bank, especially definitely for the technology sector at least. China Renaissance has never done any deal in the co-working sector, even though they've probably been aware of all of them and seen most of them. But after they heard the story of Naked Hub and looked at our business model and even our books, that's why they took on Naked Hub's Series C round financing as their first project in co-working. So I would say it would be great if things are getting more real and some of the weaker players get consolidated or even closed down, and that the investment community better understands what is co-working. I mean, it's still, even today, if you went out and talked to 10 PE guys or VC guys, just right now, I guess that no more than half of them would have any kind of clear idea of what co-working is or how WeWork makes money. So as the investment community also is learning just along with everybody else, I think it's all going to be resulting in a much healthier evolution. I think unless something falls apart, you'll see maybe next week at TechCrunch, we'll announce a modest size acquisition right here in Shanghai of another player, and possibly one in another country market as well that we've been working on recently. So we do see ourselves like right up on the ground level that there are entrepreneurs who have started off and opening a nice space or couple of nice spaces, but then realizing that the challenges of the business and the advantages of being a network player, a big network, and so choosing to join forces with us and merging with us is one way for them to grow, and also, of course, a way for us to grow as well.
Cool. I've got in my mind, I've got one question. Maybe this isn't the right place to. Well, first of all, I have a friend who's in Hong Kong. You guys opened a big space in Hong Kong recently, didn't you?
Yes, we did. We have 2 locations open in Hong Kong now.
Yeah, my friend was. My question basically is about, you guys are pretty much a foreign-owned organization, non-Chinese founder. You yourself, Dominic, are not Chinese. I know a lot of the key the staff in head office are also non-Chinese, and recently, at least amongst my social group, there's been discussion of, is it possible for non-Chinese to scale a unicorn in China? A lot of people feel the market is so tough, it moves so fast, and there's less and less case studies of non-Chinese building successful internet businesses or sharing economy businesses. But it seems that you guys, I know the group has been around for a long time, but the co-working, the hub concept is actually very new, and that's the part that's scaling right now and looks like it could become, as you said, seriously large. You've got a very big vision for it. What are the lessons that what advice would you give to non-Chinese who are trying to crack the Chinese market? Because it seems like you guys are doing a particularly good job, and it is a very tough market to be in, fiercely competitive. Any advice or lessons learned?
Yeah, certainly. That's a really great and interesting question. I think, the good news is that for Luoxin, Naked. So it's, as I mentioned, it's not, most people are shocked to find out that it's not a Chinese founder, but they still perceive it as a Chinese brand and a Chinese company. So when it comes to a foreign founder in China, I guess my major advice is to get Chinese as fast as you can. You as the founder need to become Chinese capable. You need to have the language and cultural skills to build a Chinese team and work very closely with a Chinese team. So even though several of our management team are not local Chinese, but we've all been here for practically a lifetime. Grant, the founder of Naked, has been here for 13 years. But John, the CEO of Naked Hub, has been here for 20 years. 20 plus years, and I myself 25 years. And so we've been working with Chinese teams and Chinese partners for all our lives and living here for all of our adult lives. Delphine, our chief architect, she's Hong Kong Chinese, and she's been here for about 15 years. But the key point of all is that, out of the 200 people working, almost 200 people working at Naked Hub, 160 of them, 160 maybe out of 180 are local Chinese. So all the brains of the company are all there in our various functional teams, whether it be our community team, our operations team, our technology team, our projects team are by far local Chinese. And so my advice is that if you're a foreign founder coming into China or already in China, it's really a matter of your success is probably going to be determined by how well you can really work side by side and how well you can really develop personal relationships with local Chinese people.
Yeah, and that cultural gap, that language gap can sometimes be quite difficult.
Yes, I think especially if you're in a segment where it's internet-like, meaning that it's characterized by very fast pace of innovation and very fast and intense competition, such as co-working, but also many other industries. If you're really going to succeed, you're going to need to be able to attract and retain sort of grade A talent, and specifically grade A local talent. And I don't believe you can actually do that on a sustained basis unless you can really culturally connect with your people. Because as you guys know, in Chinese culture, it's quite, there's this very strong personal aspect to it. The work and work life is very intertwined with personal life and personal identity. So if you don't have the skill to connect with people at that level, at that deeper level, it's going to be very hard to even get them on board in the first place, let alone retain them. And if you can't do that, then your chance of success should be probably quite low. So you need to develop those skills, spend time hanging out with Chinese people, get Chinese partners, and make your team as local as possible, as quickly as possible.
Yeah,
but it is possible. So, I'm loving the story of Musical.ly because if you look at that product, it's such a beautiful consumer internet product. Looks like it was built and polished in Silicon Valley or New York City, but lo and behold, it was totally produced and conceived and designed by 50 Chinese people right here in Shanghai. But it's for the U.S. market, so it's very doable. You can cross-culture business or China to global businesses is another exciting trend that's happening right now.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Dominic, I think that's about all the time that we have. But before we go, where should our listeners find you if they want to get in touch?
They can find me right here at Naked Hub. We've just come to nakedhub.com. You can find out where all our locations are. I'm always hanging around, very open concept. You can always find me in the living room. You can find me on WeChat as Dom the Calm, DHECALM is my handle, or you can find me in LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. All right. Well, Dominic, thank you so much again for taking the time to tell us about yourself and about Naked Hub, as well as co-working spaces and the market here in China.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Matt.